Hey everyone, it's Bethany from Beth and Books and welcome back to this Book Nook. Today I'm coming at you with episode 2 of... So if you're thinking, where the heck is episode 1, I actually did a video where I in-depthly reviewed The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is book 0 in the Hunger Games series, and I realised I wanted to make this a bit more of a video series within itself. So the goal of this series is to introduce you to hyped books, briefly discuss what they are about, and then give you my thoughts and just ideas around the book in question to try delve into if it's worth the hype and if you yourself should pick it up. And at the end I'm going to go on Goodreads and see what their thoughts about the book are and if I agree and disagree. So without any further ado, let's get into this video's book. And that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Some statistics. It is 404 pages. It was published on April the 7th, 2020 this year, so it's a relatively new release. Written by Gendry. Am I thinking of that Game of Thrones guy? What the heck? Grady Hendrix, who in the past has won the Bram Stoker Award for his book My Best Friend's Exorcism. I haven't read that myself. If you have, let me know if I should. And also this book is an adult paranormal fantasy with a contemporary setting and some horror. I also need to let you know there are triggers galore. So aside from the obvious gore and blood that comes with vampires, there is also medical and pill abuse, there is domestic abuse, there is blatant sexism, there is rape of both grown women and children. Oh, and potential suicide triggers in here as well. So it's very loaded, very adult, definitely not young adult. And also if you start reading this and you're thinking, girl, where are all of those triggers you told me about? The last 100 pages. Just be aware, team, if you're reading it and thinking everything is rosy, you're in for a shock. So in terms of what I rated it, oh, let me put this book somewhere. There we go, that's the best I can do with this lighting. In terms of what I rated it, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. So not my most favourite book in the world by any means, but also not one that I wouldn't suggest to fellow readers. Breaking it down using my rating acronym of powers, I gave it the pace is 5 out of 10, the people and characters 6 out of 10, the originality a 7, the world building a 6, my general enjoyment a 7, the relationships a 9, and the writing style an 8. So as you can tell, my favourite aspect of this book were the relationships and my least favourite was the pace. Now let me give you a brief synopsis. This book is set in America and we follow our main character Patricia. Patricia is a housewife, she has a husband who's a dick, and a son and a daughter, both of teenage years for the majority of the book. Then one day what happens is one of Patricia's neighbours, an elderly lady, is sick and her nephew comes up to help. The old lady ends up dying. This isn't a spoiler, it happens within like the first few pages. And the nephew moves in. Long story short, the nephew is a vampire, but the problem is Patricia had already invited him into her home, which in classic vampire folklore meant he could come and go as he pleased, and that did not end up well. Bad news, Patricia, bad news. Now, as I was reading this, I couldn't help but draw parallels to Bram Stoker's Dracula. Beyond the fact that they are both vampire stories, obviously, they just had so many parallels. The first one being the pace. Let's start there. Going into the book, you know that the neighbour is a vampire. It is so heavily implied and it's got the name in the title. So you're kind of waiting and waiting for the vampire-ness to come out. The first, say, 150 pages, there's no real vampire-ness. I know that's not a word, but you hardly see any vampire action. It's all setting the scene, telling you that it's a safe suburban metropolis, and then shock surprise as a vampire. It's kind of like in Dracula, how as a modern audience, you know that he's a vampire and the whole time you're like, idiots, idiots. That's a vampire. Like, blah. And we know that the neighbour, I should stop calling him the neighbour, let me find his name, James. Essentially what I'm trying to say is you go in expecting all this vampireness and it takes a while to start up, which for me meant that I was less interested, is the only way to put it. You then have other elements. I'm just going to get this parallel to Dracula out of the way because nerdy me really got into it. She wrote notes. So in the same way you have Van Helsing as the person who hunts down the vampire, you can think of Patricia in that role. There is a gang of vampire hunters, this one being the collection of book club ladies. There's the whole controlling animals aspect. There's the whole like luring out people and not draining them all at once side of things. And there's also a lot of classic tropes. So as someone who had read Dracula and was immediately picking this up, I couldn't help but feel like this was just a modern Dracula story. So it started to feel like a book that I had read before. However, the originality of the vampire, let me tell you, it creeped me out. It would give you nightmares. I don't want to tell you how it's different because I think it's such a fun shock and interesting twist to read about how James feeds on his victims, but just also be aware within that very adult. No kids, like, do not let a child read this, please. Oh, also, if you're scared of rats, beware of page 130. So let's talk about the characters, and I cannot talk about the characters without talking about the time setting. So the book starts in 1988 and there are about 5 or 6 parts, and each part you jump forward by either a couple of years or a couple of months. So 1988 and we end in 1996. During this time you can potentially imagine the labels and stereotypes around women who work from home, and as soon as they have thoughts of their own, they are deemed crazy. Now, this is where I got really mad, and I suppose, to be honest, it's a good thing because if a book can get a rise out of you, that makes it a good book, right? But, I just wanted to, these men were telling these wives of theirs, no, you can't have thoughts of your own, you are female. And I know that this is indicative of that time. Ooh, I've got a leaf on my finger. And things have definitely changed. Not everyone, but there's definitely been progress, can't deny that. So reading about it just made me feel so much anger for the women, made me feel connected to them. God, I hated those men. The reason why I bumped it from a 3 to a 3.5 stars was those last pages. Like I've said, they get really intense, but it's to do, I think, with everything coming to a really dramatic climax in the end of the book, and all of that slow waiting for stuff to happen really paid off. So do I think it's worth the hype? No. I do not think that it is anything more spectacular than other books out there. It's just a really bog standard, interesting, potentially infuriating and terrifying read. But I don't think there's anything about it that sets it apart from other books for me. If you like Dracula kind of vampire stories, if you like classics and you're looking to go into a more modern genre, this might be a good place to start because it definitely has similarities with how classics are written. If you want to start straying from contemporary to paranormal or vice versa, I think this has a good balance of both. So with that being said, I am really intrigued to see what people on Goodreads have said about this. So I'm going to pop my laptop here and let's just respond to some reviews. So there is one 5-star review here, and I'm so happy for this person because they really loved it. And they're talking about this little element, this scene where a lady attacks another lady and bites her earlobe off, and they're saying how crazy and weird things can happen and how that's so exciting. I think yes, it was exciting, but it wasn't written in a way that excited me. It was written in a way that made me think, see, there's evidence that this person's a vampire, and you're still not like, hey, this person's a vampire. I also find it interesting because this person has mentioned that they loved the women's quirky antics and loyalty and their secret power that they have because they're forced to hide it because of their husband's abuse. At least it's recognised as abuse. But personally, I don't find that joyful or exciting. I find that infuriating and demeaning. So that's just obviously different tastes in the books. This review has me kind of smiling to myself in how this person is talking about how they yearned for more, and I think that is so accurate to what I was feeling when I read this. This person actually has the same star rating of me, and when they're talking about expecting a different kind of vampire book, yeah, I get that. If I hadn't known that there was horror in it, I definitely would have expected more of like a suburban wife strength coming together kind of a style, like Babysitter's Club, but women, and there's a vampire thrown in the mix. And I also agree that part of the issue with it is the great juxtaposition, the great divide between how light the first half is and how dark the second half is. I think personally I would have preferred the horror element to have been there from the very beginning, because that was the most entertaining part for me. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. I apologise in advance if this book review has been lacking in something for you. If you do want me to touch on something specific in my next reviews, please leave a comment down below so I can grow and learn as I keep producing videos. Also, if you want to put in a request for what book I do this series with next, leave that down below. I'm definitely going to be doing Midnight Sun, because that comes out in a few days in current me time. So with all of that being said and done, please consider leaving a cheeky like and subscribe down below if you have the time and energy, and enjoy all the places you go in your own reading adventures. Bye.